Did the coronavirus come from a wet market in Wuhan, China, where they were selling bats and other exotic animals, or did it come from a lab in Wuhan, China, where they were studying viruses from bats and other exotic animals? In some ways, it almost doesn't matter. We know that it came from Wuhan, China, but this question is being talked about more openly. The idea that it may have come from a lab, specifically the Wuhan Institution for Virology, after one man raised the idea, U.S. President Donald Trump.
But I will tell you, more and more we're hearing the story, and we'll see. When you say multiple sources, now there's a case where you can use the word sources, but we are doing a very thorough examination of this horrible situation that happened. Go ahead, please.
In your many conversations with President Xi, Mr. President, did you ever discuss with him State Department concerns about lax safety protocols that had been reported to the State Department from the embassy in Beijing about that laboratory?
I don't want to discuss what I talked to him about the laboratory. I just don't want to discuss it. It's inappropriate right now. Please go ahead in the back.
Of course, Trump is not the first person to put this idea out there. In fact, the first time I heard about it was based on a paper out of a university in China. Chinese academics positing the idea that one of two labs in Wuhan, close to the market, may have been responsible for leaking this out. Now, this is not the conspiracy theory out there on the internet that this is a bioweapon that is being used by China to punish the world. You know, is that feasible? Is it possible? Well, I guess so, but I highly doubt it considering they unleashed it on their own people first. But the idea that it was leaked out inadvertently is not crazy, and that's what this Chinese academic paper suggested back at the beginning of February. Now, before Donald Trump talked about it, there was also an op-ed in the Washington Post where they described detailed cables from the State Department that were sent by officials in Wuhan, China, after visiting the Institution for Virology. And they talked about lax security, lax practices in place to make sure that viruses did not leak out. We've got a laboratory like this in Winnipeg, and the simple fact is that it's incredibly difficult to get in and out of. There is a lot of security around it, and officials at the U.S. State Department said those were not in place at this lab in Wuhan, even though they were working with very dangerous sets of viruses, including looking at new coronavirus strains. So is it possible that this is how it leaked out into the community, that perhaps one of the workers got infected, then they took it home, and then it spread into the community? Absolutely. I've talked to researchers who say that the idea that this showed up in a wet market in December just isn't plausible because the virus itself is too old for that. I'm not someone that researches viruses. I can't tell the age of a virus, but if that's what the experts are saying, then it is worth looking at this possibility that it did come from one of these two labs, or the virology lab in particular. It doesn't change the fact that China downplayed the severity of this outbreak, that they lied to their own people about it. But the fact that so many people would just simply dismiss this because Donald Trump said it is ridiculous, and yet that's what's happening.
And they're not reporting the facts, and that's up to them.
People are saying this is an idea that couldn't possibly happen because they don't like Trump. It's like when he suggested that malaria drug, what's it called, hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, that this could somehow be used to treat. Many media outlets, many studies had said this is possible. You know, it wasn't definitive, but hey, this could work. It was talked about widely in the media. As soon as Trump talked about it, it was dismissed as garbage, and that is what is happening here. End of the day, we've got to deal with what the hand we've been dealt right now, which is a pandemic unleashed upon the world that could have been stopped by better actions from national governments that, like Canada's, that were receiving it, or governments in Europe, but also the fact that China didn't deal with this properly. They didn't take it seriously, and they may have unleashed it on the world, whether it came from a wet market or it came from a lab. We need the answers eventually, and just dismissing ideas because you don't like someone who mentioned it is the wrong way to go about investigating how all of this happened.